Hi everyone, Charlene here. Today I'm going to show you how to make a beautiful vintage bell using the lovely Layers Sleigh Bell from Honeybee Stamps. This set has everything you need to create a layered bell with lots of fun surrounding foliage. There's a little hanger for the bell as well. I'm going to start by grabbing the two bell pieces. I'm going to cut the large base piece from a darker yellow and the top bell piece from a lighter color of yellow cardstock. I have my two bell pieces and I'll start working with the lighter bell piece which goes on top. I have some Distress Oxide here in Vintage Photo. I'm going to get a small amount on my brush and I'll start by bringing it up and onto the bell, going all the way around, adding some darkness and some shading. I'm coming up about a third of the way onto the bell. Once I'm happy with the amount of Vintage Photo I have on there, I'll break out a darker brown, which is ground espresso. I'll grab a little bit on my brush, and this I'll just bring slightly onto the edges of the bell, darkening them up and continuing to add that dimension. Once the edges are nice and dark, you can see it creates this lovely distressed vintage look. And this is going to layer over that slightly darker yellow, which we're going to darken up even more. I'll use the same ground espresso here and I'll bring it up and on to the base layer of the bell about a third of the way. So I made this pretty dark going along all of those edges with the ground espresso, and you can see this is going to show back behind that top layer of the bell. Now this bell would look lovely as is, but I'm going to bring in some distressed Spritz in Fossilized Amber. I'll shake this up really well, do a test spray off to the side, and then I'm going to mist our pieces a couple of times. You can let this air dry, or if you're impatient like me, you can bring in a heat tool. I'm going to bring back in some of my Vintage Photo because I feel like I've lost a little bit of the darkness around the edges of my bell. So I'll bring that up and on around those edges just to build that dimension back up again. You certainly could spritz first to avoid that issue. I'll do the same thing with the ground espresso, just adding some more of that darkness back in. Now you can see we have that shine from our spritz and all of that nice vintage distressing. I'll set aside our bell and pick out some colors for cardstock for the rest of our pieces. I've got everything ready here. I'll start with a dark brown for the top layer of the pine cone and a lighter brown for the inner base layer of the pine cone. I have two different reds here. I'll use the lighter red for the holly berries as well as for the two top pieces of the bow. For the remaining bow pieces, I will cut them out of some darker red cardstock. The holly leaves I'm going to cut out of this dark teal color. And then the pine branches I'll cut from more of a pine green color. I have my pieces all cut out. I'm grabbing some Vintage Photo again and darkening up the edges of those leaves. Now I know it's brown, but trust me, it adds some nice dimension on there. So here, the one on the left I've inked and the one on the right I haven't. And you can see it's subtle, but really nice. I'll grab my three pine pieces here, bring that Vintage Photo up from the bottom so it adds some darkness around the base. I'll let the ink fade into the green as I go up and onto the pine bough and repeat that with all three. Next, I'll grab my pine cone here and I'll bring it all the way around these edges up and onto the pine cone, leaving the center lighter. That creates a nice 3D look for the pine cone. For shading on the bow, I have some aged Mahogany Distress Oxide here. This is a little bit darker and kind of a little dingier than the reds we're using on the cardstock, so I'll bring it up here on the base of the hanger. Then I'll bring it across the center of the bottom piece of the bow. I'm holding it with two fingers to make it easier. Then I'll grab the top layer of the bow and I'll bring this just lightly across the center. Now I can put together all of our pieces. I'll start here with the bow. I'm adding a dot of glue to the end of the hanger and then bringing in the bottom portion of the bow. I'll add a dot of glue to the center of that piece and bring in the base layer of the main bow. I'll grab the lighter top piece of the bow here and I'm going to add glue all the way along the back, and this will layer over the top of the other bow piece. add another dot of glue on here, and then I can just pop on the little center topper piece. So here is our completed bow. For the acorn, I'm going to take the detail layer and add some glue all the way along the back. I am going to tap this off on some scrap paper to get off any excess glue. Then I can layer this over the main pine cone piece that we ink blended. Here's our finished pine cone. I want the bell to have some dimension. So I'll flip over the top piece and I'm going to cut up some foam tape here and add it all the way along the back. I'll go ahead and remove all of that release tape, then line this up very carefully before I drop it into place. So I'm using my fingers to make sure everything is nice and lined up so that I can guide the two pieces together. And once they start to come together, I can kind of push them onto each other. So here's our popped up bell piece, nice little bit of dimension. I'm going to get my sentiment prepped, so I'll stamp out the Season's Greeting sentiment here from the Warm Holiday Wishes stamp set. I'll ink this up with some intense black ink, flip and press and lift, and I'll do a second stamping here just to build up that black some more. So we'll flip and press and lift. That looks great. Next, I'll cut this out with the coordinating die. The current freebie is 12 sheets of A2 sized cardstock. It's all these fun designs and patterns, perfect for the holidays. I've chosen one from here. It's this lovely little village scene, and I'll use that as my background. I'll start by putting together my bow with the bell piece. So I'll add some glue here along the top of the bell and then just drop the bow piece right over the top. Now I can do a dry run of everything and arrange it kind of where I think I'll want it to go. I have a general idea now of where I want everything to go. So I'll pick up my bell here and I can start adding glue to the different pieces. I'll add some glue here to the stem of this first pine bough, and then I can tuck it back behind the bell. I'll grab my next pine piece here and tuck this one in as well. I'll grab the third pine piece, add some glue, and tuck this one in on the other side. You can always add additional glue as you go along to make sure things stay in place. I'm also going to trim off the tails now that everything's in place so that they're not visible. I'll add some glue here to the bottom of the holly leaves and tuck these in back behind the bell as well. Now I'll flip the entire piece over and add some glue here along the back where I want my pine cone to go, and I'll just adhere the pine cone back behind there. Add some glue here to the back of everything, the bell, the pine cone, all that good stuff. And then I can center this right in the middle of that background piece I've chosen. I want this to have a little bit of space at the bottom as well as a little bit of space at the top. I've added some foam tape to the back of my sentiment, and I'm going to center this right across the center of the bell. Now I can add in my holly berries, so I'll just add a little bit of glue to the back of these and tuck them behind the bow back onto the holly leaves. Next, I can add glue to the back of our completed card panel and adhere this to an A2 sized card base. Here is our completed card with that fun vintage bell and all of that beautiful foliage we have back behind there. I think this turned out really cute and great for the season. I hope that you all picked up some tips and tricks today. Please be sure to like and subscribe as well as hit that notification bell so that you'll know about future videos here on the Honeybee Stamps YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.